Right Pack Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media, for writers, by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Now, welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, creator, author, producer, insane man. And with us today is...
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. You can find me on August the 14th. It's a Sunday afternoon from 1:30 to 3:30 at Patrick's Westport, where I'm doing a benefit for breast cancer survivors. It costs $25, and believe me, you'll get your money's worth. So go to Wine, Wit, and Lit and follow the link and join us on the 14th of August. Jen Stelzer is going to be there talking to people.
Yeah.
I'm also going to be at Wildwood Celebrates the last Saturday in August.
I'm Lee Savage, author of the erotica for the Truly Wicked, and under the pen name Carrie Lee Williams, a couple of children's books.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'll be your on-the-spot reporter.
Woohoo!
I'm also a children's book author and illustrator working on my first self-published fantasy novel called Threadcaster. And I'm still halfway through because I've been bogged down with illustration work. So, good news and bad news. The good news is that it's work. The bad news is that it's not my novel.
And the good news, it gets paid.
The good news is that it's paying me now instead of later, which is what happens when you self-publish.
Right.
Brad R. Cook, the author of the Iron Chronicles, which is a steampunk adventure series. Check out the Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu, and coming this November, Iron Lotus. You can also get A Clockwork Heart, which is my award-winning short story, on Amazon. Check it out. And you will find David and I at the Big River Steampunk Festival Labor Day weekend in Hannibal, Missouri, locking swords with each other, and the real metal kind.
Yes.
Get your mind out of the gutter. And then you can also find us at Archon coming later.
Yes, Archon. I'll be there too.
Yes. Jennifer will be talking at Archon, Brad will be talking at Archon, and I will be talking at Archon.
And those two will be trying to kill each other at Archon, and maybe I'll draw a picture or something.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll be attending Archon.
Attending, yay!
She'll be healing my wounds. No.
Yeah, you're on the side. You're going to be wearing the little nurse cap. You have a giant roll of bandages that you can run in and just wrap around all of the bleeding wounds.
Then, my name's Melanie Courtney. I write nonfiction, science fiction, and fantasy, and I do have a bachelor's in biology, which might, explain all the...
You can tell them why they're dying of gangrene.
Exactly.
Yes, but I, don't have paramedics training, so people should keep that in mind.
Neither did they. Neither did the old ages.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and just FYI. Hello. Sorry, you're behind my normal cough. But anyway, on August the 6th, St. Louis Writers Guild is having Writers in the Park. This was
The seventh annual.
The 7th annual Writers in the Park will start at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
Run till 2 o'clock. There will be presenters, some of which may be those sitting around this table here talking. Also, too, at 1 o'clock that same day at Writers in the Park, we will have a live recording open to the public of Right Pack Radio. So come join. If you're a fan and you're in St. Louis, you can come in, sit in, and at least listen. If not, actually participate and be on the panel for Right Back Radio.
Okay.
It is a free writers conference, so it's free to attend, no charge whatsoever, no registration needed. Just come on over to the Kirkwood Community Center at 10 a.m., check out all the workshops we've got going that day, and then definitely drop into the book room where we will have all kinds of local author books, and perhaps even buy a book, get a sandwich.
Free sandwich.
The greatest promotional gimmick in history.
Yes.
Buy a book and a sandwich. Pay extra for the soda.
Yes, but I think that's even at cost. So,
Yeah.
And today, the topic is going to be how to make your character's thoughts dramatic. You know, we've talked about dialogue in the past, and we've talked about how to use dialogue to move your story forward, what not to do, but we haven't really talked about monologue, especially the internal monologue of a character. So let's start off with when do you ever find that any characters that you've read or written are boring to listen to? And then we'll go up to the thoughts, how to make them dramatic.
Boring is
Boring.
that's a little bit separate than just monologues. It's not all monologues are boring.
No.
I mean, we all know Bill Pullman's famous speech from Independence Day. That's not boring. That's like powering. However, when a character goes on for too long, that can be monotonous. But you know, most monologues are actually pretty cool.
Especially if they have a good build, and the one that you're talking about does.
Yeah, it's a great build.
It ratchets up and gets more and more emotional as time goes on, which is what any good scene does, really. But it's especially important with monologue, I think.
Yep.
Now, I'm the one who's in the weird catbird seat here of
Catbird seat.
writing for audio plays or audio dramas, radio dramas. And you've got to be real careful how long you want to have a monologue go. Because if you don't have other characters talking within, say, roughly a minute to a minute and a half, which is equivalent of a page and a half of dialogue, the audience considers the other characters to no longer be there.
They forget they're there.
You got it.
The same thing goes with plays. When you're writing a play, you know, monologues are a huge part of theater. Every actor wants to give that dramatic monologue.
To be or not to be.
Exactly. You know, Shakespeare's filled with them. But yeah, you have to use them sparingly. And to be honest, we've talked about dialogue before. Having two characters fire back and forth at each other is way more entertaining than just listening to one character drone on and on and on and on.
You know.
It also provides a chance for the people in the room with your monologuing character to act and react to the words that are being said, which helps inform the reader on how they're supposed to act and react.
I would say something too about dialogue in which you have two people who are talking over each other. I just went to a play this week in which that happened. In fact, they were screaming at each other. One could not understand any words that either of them said, and the whole thing was so shrill that I just wanted to cover my ears. So I think that you have to be very careful so that whatever they're saying is going to make some degree of sense other than just being a shrill screaming match.
So you're supposed to leave a little bit of pause
I would hope,
in
yes.
theater. However, since it was a screaming match, it's an argument, I could see why they were trying to do that.
And you could sustain that for maybe a tenth of a second, that screaming match. But if it goes on for, as this did, about 40 seconds, I think that's hard on the audience's ears. It sure was hard on mine.
Mm-hmm. And it would be hard on the audience's eyes if that was a book.
Oh, and I was just going to say that the differences between like whether you're reading it and hearing it or seeing it, there's very subtle changes in how it has to be written then, because what might work for just the written work might not work visually, so you have to move things around. Whereas if it's an audio play, then you have to consider the visuals out, so everything has to be expressed vocally. And news is we're currently working on the process of changing my first book, Angel of Death, into a script, possibly for a movie. And so I'm seeing those changes as the things that are thought have to be now changed into visual type text. And it's very different looking at the formats of how that has to be.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that you've got to consider when you're working on monologue or dialogue is what media are you writing for? Because theater script, audio script, movie script, novels, all that's four completely different stylizations of writing. It makes a huge difference. But let's go back to talking about monologue more.
Yeah, I thought this was about inner monologue.
Inner monologue, in which, in the case of screenplays, the case of theater can be handled in two different ways. Screenplay can be handled also in two ways. Radio dramas handled only in one way that I know of, and then novels usually handles it in one certain way. Let me back up. Let me go backwards to that list. Novels, short stories, same format. Usually the internal monologue is italicized.
Or just an assumed part of the narration.
Yeah,
Right.
It can't just be part of the narration.
Especially in a first-person story, you can just
story.
ramble on forever with I's and me's without it being in quotation marks, and people understand that it's going on in their head.
Good caveat.
Which, however, though, to what you were saying,
Uh-huh.
direct thought monologue tends to be done in italics.
Right.
As opposed to just espousing endlessly about the universe.
I will say that in Shakespeare, a lot of his monologues were asides, which means the characters didn't hear them.
Yeah,
the
they broke the
characters in the
fourth
play
wall.
didn't
Yeah,
hear them.
and
they were
then that's
just
getting to,
referenced.
Yep.
theater, which is
Yeah.
That was my next one. Thank
Ah.
you. You
Go
got
for
it.
it.
So she answered the next one in theater.
Yeah.
Brad, you're also a theater script
Yeah,
writer.
it's
You
really
are.
common to have them break from the stage and turn to the audience, and that's assumed to be an inner monologue. As opposed to breaking the fourth wall,
Yeah.
you know, where you're directly communicating with the audience. It can just be, inner thoughts expressed outward to the, audience. And usually that's done by looking up and not at the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you break the fourth wall, you stare at the audience. You're directly having communication with them. You might sit down on the edge of the stage or something like that.
Depending on how much you have to say.
Exactly.
Right.
But if it's inner monologue, you tend to look up. So that it gives that visual cue that you're not actually in direct communication.
Look at the stage lights where God lives.
Exactly.
And you can do something similar with a radio play by getting very close to the microphone and speaking softly,
Right.
as though the rest of the characters couldn't possibly hear you.
Which is also done in movies,
Right.
where the character will stop talking and then you'll hear the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yes, we are
Take a
back in
drink.
a drinking game.
Take a drink.
Fear is the mind killer. So let's not fear.
And what you're both are correct. In the case of writing for audio plays, you list that as narration or as hot on mic, which indicates that the character, the voice actor, is very close and talking in a more intimate tone to make you feel like you're inside the character's head. In movies, television scripts, where it's the same thing. Brad, you're correct too. You've got two aspects of it. You've got where you've got voiceover, and the voiceover does exactly the same thing as a radio script, in the sense of that person's talking very close to the mic, where it's being recorded, but you don't see them talking on the television or movie screen. In the case of another one of my favorite versions of this is Ferris Bueller's Days Off. Ferris Bueller Days. I can't get it out.
Say Ferris.
Ferris. Okay. Anyway, Bueller. Okay. But he breaks the fourth wall and he's talking directly to the audience, and he's actually it's a monologue he's having that's telling you the thoughts of the character, and it's done sparingly.
Yeah, my
Really
sister
well
got a car,
done.
but I just got a computer.
Yes. So, but what's the purpose of these monologues? I mean, it's just to break up the action and go, okay, I'm King Henry V. I'm tired of all this fighting. We're about to go into this war and battle at Agincourt. Whichever one you did.
In my books, it's to convey inner emotions because I'm writing romance and erotica, and most of that is emotional based. So if the feelings aren't there and you don't know what the other character is feeling, you're gonna lose that connection, and it's not gonna seem right when they come together.
So you're revealing character with it.
Yes.
Okay. Adora?
In old time, especially film noir mystery, you'll find it fairly often when it came from a book to begin with, and so there is a great deal of description that has to be left out. And I suppose they didn't want to leave it out because there wouldn't be too much of the story left if you did leave it out. And so you'll find a lot of voiceovers in which they describe the buxom woman, for example, and how she turns him on. You'll find a lot of that as, I suppose, adding depth to the story is the purpose in mysteries, especially mysteries of film noir.
Because it'd be creepy if he was saying all that stuff out loud.
It would
Oh, very
indeed.
Unless you were doing something similar to Deadpool and you were breaking the fourth wall with it.
But that's
it
still an inner
seemed
monologue.
creepy.
It would, yeah, it's still the same thing.
Yeah. Talking about with radio dramas, the same aspect too, is we talked before about the voice being close, but they use a lot of description that's where your description of the buxom blonde or whatever is coming out. And one of my favorite ones is from Broadway is My Beat. And I'm trying to recall the actual words, and if I remember it right, it was a posh hotel with posh carpets, and she laid there like a broken doll, as if some child had left her behind.
Those gems have to be included somehow, don't they?
Exactly.
Mhm.
So one way is to build empathy. Another thing is to do. Is to reveal the character, and also provide some descriptions. Also, building empathy. You get build empathy with your character, or attempt to build empathy. I'm trying to picture some bad guys talking, and you might not be able to build that empathy. How do you do? There's one more element too. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out. Thoughts that add tension and suspense.
Which is what Shakespeare does.
Well, Shakespeare does that quite well.
Well, he
does
like
all.
most of his monologues are used to build up the story, less a character. Like in Hamlet, as you were throwing out earlier, the to be or not to be speech is, it's a way of emoting anguish. It's a way of continuing the story, telling you things that are happening that might not actually happen right there on stage. So,
Or that the audience cannot see. Is this
Exactly.
a dagger I see before me?
yeah.
The handle toward my hand. Come, let me clutchly. It's showing that Macbeth is going totally berserk.
Well, one of my favorite monologues from Shakespeare, Henry V. Upon the king lies our lives, our souls, our debts, our careful wives, our children, and our sins must all lay upon the king who must bear all. Twin born with greatness, subject to the breath of every fool whose mind consents no more than its own ringing. What if in his heart's ease do kings neglect the private men enjoy? And I keep going, because this thing's memorized, but that's right before the Battle of Agincourt, after he's walked around.
I just want to say I'm impressed with how many of you can recite monologues. I have no room in my brain to memorize monologues anymore.
I'll admit that I started off as a playwright because I wanted to write these grand monologues that would be remembered throughout history and beyond. Yeah,
And now you write steampunk, which is really fun.
exactly. Now I write for fun because there's no point in writing those giant crazy monologues.
I can't even remember
But I
what
tried
I
to
wrote
put
in my
some of it
first
in.
book. I'm having to go back and look because they're like wanting me to pick out certain scenes to go ahead and script ahead of time instead of before they do the full script, so they can do a teaser thing. And I'm like, I have to go back and reread.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, in Iron Horseman, there is a scene towards the end where Alexander barges in on all the adults and gives a beautiful, Shakespearean-style monologue, yelling at them for the craziness that they're doing and seizing control of the situation.
Draw Alexander.
Exactly.
So,
Monologues are good. Good stuff.
in your monologues, I'm going to go through each of these. One is how you moving the story along, which includes description. Second, build empathy. Third, reveal of character. And fourth is adding tension and suspense. I'm going to ask you how you do some of those. Go ahead.
Well, I would add another one, a fifth if you like,
Sure.
which is perspective. That is, especially in mystery, you probably don't want your chief character, who knows a lot more than anybody else, your Sherlock Holmes, to be the one that you're using a lot of interior monologue for, because he's going to give everything away. You need a Dr. Watson who doesn't know, so that it can serve as the audience and get clues dribbled at him from time to time in order to make the mystery play out as a mystery for the audience.
Yep.
And not for the key character. So it gives a lot of perspective in mysteries, and I think that's a key role for it.
Asking questions that the audience is going to
Exactly.
ask. Yeah, very much so.
And with mystery, among all the story types there are, mystery is a game that is played between author and reader, or author and audience. You've got to play fair. That's a trick.
Absolutely.
You have to pay fair or have enough of a payoff that you don't break the contract with the reader.
Exactly.
Like one of my favorite books is And Then There Were None, or 10 Little Indians by Agatha Christie. And I was reading it, and I was having such a good time that when she revealed the ending, and I was like, well, that's kind of stupid. I was ready to forgive her, because I enjoyed it. And she kind of said, no, it's all right. See, this is how that works. It's like, okay. I was, but after that, I always had a fondness for murder mystery stories where people are picked off one by one in the shadows. Until it's just protag and the murderer at the very end, you think. I won't spoil the ending of Agatha Christie in case people haven't read And Then There Were None. Or watched it, or listened to it. I believe it's also in...
Yeah,
Sure.
Find it. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Also check out her Mousetrap if you can find it.
That's
Or
more of
black
a
coffee.
challenge.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, black coffee is awesome. But anyway, okay, let's start off with number 5 then, perspective. We talked about using a Dr. Watson or a character that's not in the complete know. What are some other ways to demonstrate perspective through internal monologue?
That's it, as far as I'm concerned. I write mystery.
I was gonna say that's what Dune does.
Please,
It's what-
one of my favorite
that's
books.
what Dune does with with all
Okay.
the interior monologues. There, it's for perspective. It's Paul absorbing what he hears, what he takes out, and then his thought process that goes through that. So it's very when he's thinking about whatever he's giving thought to, the spice, how it must flow.
So it's anyone processing information
Yeah, it's a way
that
of
is
processing
standing in for
information
the audience.
that isn't done through
Yeah.
dialogue with another character, or just straight narration. Like if it was third person, you could narrate through some of that, but it'd get kind of boring. By giving it into internal monologue, you're giving it that sense of drama.
That's right, it does kick it up a notch. I write typically in third person limited, and I limit myself to one character, at least one character per chapter.
Yeah.
It could be Frank Butler, it could be my main protagonist, Jemima McBustle, but those are the only ones that I would try to bring in how they felt about it, or what their fears were, what their likes were, what their problems were, so that it does ratchet up the basic roots of the story and the basic roots of dialogue too.
So then the next question would be is, in your internal monologues, how do you add tension? How do you add suspense? What are some ways you guys
It's a
do it?
conversation. It's just a conversation with yourself. So the same way you would build for dialogue, you're going to use an internal monologue. We talked about building. So you're going to build up, like in Independence Day speech. It builds. There's it starts off slow and becomes very robust at the end. Dune uses a whisper, and most use that whisper as a way of drawing you in, making you kind of like lean forward to hear.
Give me an example. Are you talking about the movie or are you talking about the book?
The movie specifically.
Okay.
The book's a little bit different. The book doesn't have quite the. It has some internal monologue, but it's not used as beautifully as it is in the movie. But yeah, and anytime you're dialogue is a way so you keep your sentences short, or if you're not going to keep your interior thoughts, your internal thoughts short, then you have to do the building monologue. Another way is just to add in the emotion. So is the character scared, afraid? What are these internal thoughts making him feel?
I want to put in some caution points, though. The internal monologue, if used too much in your novel, starts to feel a little bit cliche, a little
Like
bit.
Dune? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, well, it's true. Like I
Yeah.
would say that that's the perfect way to tell a story. Mix up your internal monologues with how it feels to be inside your character's body. Even if you're writing third person, talk about how it feels in their chest, talk about how it feels in their throat, talk about the chills they get or the sweats they break out in, just to mix it up. Nothing wrong with having a thought tree every now and then, but also
No,
throw
you're
in
right.
some feelings. And I want to caution everyone against the endless stream of rhetorical questions.
Yes. Please tell me your question marks.
Because that's a I'm gonna call that an amateur mistake to fall
What
into.
am I
It's an
thinking?
easy
Yeah.
thing to do, and it starts to wear on the reader when all these questions are being given them and they're not answered.
Well, I think it's another aspect of something that an author always needs to do, and that is have a lot of variety. Don't rely upon just one method,
Yeah.
not just dialogue, not just interior monologue, not just blank out description, but use everything and meld it into the best possible way of telling the story.
And pick
But
your
don't be boring by using too much of any one thing.
Yeah, pick your strategy well, because there are some scenes in which having an internal monologue would be the most powerful way to convey this feeling, and there are other times when just saying your heart skipped a beat is enough to have the audience go, oh.
Yeah, and to that point, you should never be saying, like, internal monologue is not, I feel bad about the situation.
Uh-huh.
You know, you're going to want to describe those feelings.
Something
the way they
visceral,
are.
yes.
Yeah.
The goal is
Yeah.
to get your audience to feel the way your character feels.
Exactly. You're not. That's telling at that point. You
Yeah.
want to show.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to use internal monologue to tell. Internal monologue is just like dialogue. It's a way of imparting information that the character is thinking, a direct thought. Yeah, I don't think that I'm afraid. My heart's beating, faster and all that kind of stuff. And I might think, holy shit.
Yeah.
That would be your internal monologue.
I like to use it, especially in my vampire books, after they first turn. Because they're struggling with the hunger hitting them, all their senses being amped up. So now they can hear everything far away. They can hear the blood pounding in people's veins.
And they're
they
not
have
going to dictate it line by line to someone
Yes.
else in the room.
Right. So, and it's an internal struggle for them to try to gain this under control. And did they make the right decision in turning?
Mm-hmm.
Because for most of them, it was a choice to turn to be with the other one. Some of them didn't have that, but so for them, it's always an internal struggle when they're going through that process. So I always think that's a great way because you're conveying the emotion, and it's so many different emotions. You have the fear, the hunger, the anger. All the feelings are so amped up. So I think that's a great example of of one of the situations, because you wouldn't want to do that all the time. You want to pick your key points of, this would impact well.
So, right, feeding from that, every pun intended there, feeding from that, the way in which you're building tension and suspense through the thought process or the internal monologue is also revealing how the character feels and reacts. What are some other ways to reveal how that character's feeling about, maybe it's not a suspense moment. How do you is there a word choice? Is there a method choice that you like to use to show what your characters are feeling and by revealing them?
Well, I write both in first person and third person. My fantasy novels in third, my ghost stories in first, and both of those have different strategies to go about. Obviously, in first person, it's easier to say, I had this feeling, and you just take that at lip service, because who would know better how they're feeling than the first person protagonist who's just explaining everything to you. But I love using body language, how my chest feels, how my throat feels, how my back feels, whether you're sweating or not, whether your eyes are darting, taking into account what people are looking at, what they're focusing on, details they notice in the room sometimes. If they're afraid and want to escape, maybe they're checking for the doors. If they're scared they're going to be caught, they're looking for someone in the audience. If they're desperate to find a loved one they don't know where they are, talk about the things in the room you see instead of them as you glance around, and that's going to build the tension in the audience because we're experiencing with the character. Another option to use in that sort of situation is to have other characters remark on how your main character feels, because you can't see, and especially in first person, you can't see your main character's face. And even in third person, limited, it's weird to have your camera character, you spend a lot of time describing their facial features because you're privy to their thoughts or their emotions to a certain degree, depending on how close your narrator is to them. So it's nice to show, put some of those in there, but internal feelings are more at home in a main character. But having someone sitting across the room for them going, you look like you're pale as a ghost, and you go, oh gosh, I am. Mm-hmm. You don't realize that you're emoting outward. I had that happen to me in my real life. I realized a little too late sometimes that I wear my emotions on my sleeve really, really loudly, and I think I'm passing when I'm not. And it is in those times in my actual life, then there is someone who comes aside and says, are you okay? Because you don't look okay, and I thought I looked okay. So that's a good way to sort of show thoughts and emotions, is if someone comes over and says, Jerry, you look sick. Are you all right? And then that gives your protagonist a chance to say, you know what, I'm actually really feeling this way. And then that's conveyed in dialogue to another character, not just to the audience.
Before I go to Brad, I want to take you back a little bit on what you said, Jen. And sidebar, anytime you want to play poker, let me know, because
I don't play poker, thank you. Only if we're playing for Cheerios, bro.
Oh, there you go. On the serious side, have you ever played with a character that is not in touch with their feelings, or better yet, is lying about their feelings to the audience?
As a protagonist?
Uh-huh.
So you're the unreliable narrator.
The unreliable narrator.
Not like in a novel-length project.
Okay.
Little stuff, yeah. Writing characters that don't want to show everyone how they feel. Then you're relying very heavily on conflict. And there's stuff that goes on inside your body, when you're lying. Even if you're a really good liar, you gotta focus on lying. And sometimes it is in human nature to say the opposite of how you feel.
Uh-huh.
So if you say something like, oh, I'm fine, and then you mention how the character's heart was beating quickly and how they couldn't stop messing with their hair or something, then that's
had a big rock.
That's a sign to show that he said that. But we in the audience know he didn't mean it. He felt the opposite, perhaps, of exactly what he said. It's like, oh no, I absolutely want to marry her. He wet his pants.
Yeah. Oh, no. Wow, that was an extreme. Okay, I like it.
I was looking for extremes.
So I have played with I'm not the biggest fan of the unreliable narrator, mostly because I don't write mysteries and things of that nature where it helps. It's a benefit to your story. However, I have played with the notion of somebody who's saying something that they don't necessarily believe. Mm-hmm. That's fun. You can use that all you want. But I write a lot of middle grade and first person, so for me, internal monologue is a way of expressing thoughts that the character has. Usually I like to do astonishment. Mm-hmm. Because I can tell you, the wow factor that they feel. But then the actual thought, like, oh my god, that dragon is huge. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing that I might throw into an internal. And then I'm also a huge fan of external monologue. Internal monologue.
You don't say.
Yeah, where the character talks to themselves. I've gotten yelled at a couple of times for that, but I'm actually a huge fan of it. I talk to myself all the time, so...
it's often fun to listen to. No, sorry.
Well, it's one of those things, so it's like, I also enjoy that. I'll just have my character throw it in his dialogue, too.
Well, I'm sure you've been told by editors and critique partners or whatever, when you're doing it a lot.
Well, the thing
do you solve it by picking a character who likes to speak to themselves?
Every single time. Who are they talking to? And I'm like, really? There's no one in the room, and they're saying something.
Well, it's
to themselves.
That's the point. They want you to have.
I know. It's annoying. So that's the comment I've gotten the most. Who are they talking to?
Who are they talking to?
So, what about you, Lee? Oh, never mind. I missed the
door's got
I missed the door. A little channel there. I'm sorry.
Well, building off what Brad said, I think it is a good device for humor. Victorian women, of course, had to lie all the time, almost constantly, in order to get along. And modern women do too, let's face it.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, can be a good vehicle for comedy, because what they're thinking inside is some degree of rage, and what they say is, yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
I would say with my books, I don't really have that, because of my genre. I think the closest thing I have to that is my serial killer who's misguided in what he thinks is his mission. And he's fooled himself into believing that the people he's targeting are supernatural just because they have psychic abilities. But he's very misguided, but he's made himself believe this. So for him, it is truth until he's finally faced with the real supernatural again. And then it's revealed he was really misguided.
Coming back to you, Fedora, can you give us an example using rage and then coming up with the proverbial yes ma'am? You don't have to do yes ma'am. But, I mean, the way I'm hearing this is something along the lines of, let's see if I can do this. You little stuck up. I'm trying to avoid
Let's see if you
certain
can
words.
do this and maintain your
Yes.
your rating.
13 rating.
Yes. And that's gonna be a trick. You stuck up little nerf herder.
Nerve herder.
And you're going around and you're trying to tell people that I was guilty of doing this when you know you really did this. I can't believe it. I really can't. Yes, teacher. I will obey better. Yes, teacher. I'll write those sentences. Is that what you're talking about, or?
Generally speaking, needless to say that an 18-year-old girl in Victorian St. Louis would have orders of all kinds. People would be telling her what to do pretty much every minute of every day. And I'd resent it, wouldn't you?
I'd be the worst with a baseball bat. Let
However,
the beatings begin.
You cannot be sassy, as we talked about last week, because there are consequences and they are unpleasant. And so generally you have to do what you're ordered to do no matter how much you don't like it.
So, we've talked about, oh actually no, we haven't. There's one more area. In a way we've skirted it, in a lot of ways we've talked about it. But let's dig into it. How do you build empathy for your characters through your monologue? I know we talked about showing the real feelings. Okay, nobody can see this, but who's sitting around the table? I'm pointing right at Jennifer. Talking about showing the real feelings behind the character, what they're saying, and all this stuff really is intertwined, or like cogs in a wheel or cogs in a machine. But what are some ways you, fellow authors, like to show or like to build the empathy through your internal monologues with your characters?
Well, I give it a shot, but I don't honestly do interior monologues much in that way. Rather, I'm a save the cat kind of girl. I want to show my protagonist doing something that's positive, and I have to do that fairly frequently because she's such a liar and a con girl and a whole lot of things. So that would be what I would do to try to create empathy for my character. A save the cat scene where she does something good for somebody in a selfless sort of way.
Yeah, I would say that in my middle grades, less so than my YAs, I use it as a way of imparting his thoughts on something. Usually it goes to the whatever ism of the book might be happening, whatever theme is running through the book that I'm trying to kind of throw out, and then I'll have the character have a thought on that, so it's not necessarily about imparting wisdom or putting the story forward or something like that. It's more just, thinking that, wow, we really need to fix the environment, and, something along those lines as a way of, whatever theme I'm trying to get across in that scene. Sometimes I'll use internal monologue, especially if what's going around the character is opposite of the theme I'm trying to do, which is what I'll often do. So, the bad guys would be like destroying the environment, and then my character is thinking, God, that's bad, you really shouldn't do that. So, I don't know if it's building empathy so much, but it is a way of kind of raising in, my character, raising empathy within my characters.
The tragic past. What they've had to overcome, so that way you know what their internal struggle was and what they came from, and why they may be a little harder than what you would originally want. But then at some point you also got to soften that character if you're wanting that character to be lovable. So you have to show them growing and becoming softer.
Mine is definitely an affection for another person in their life, or another person in our party or on our cast. If the character Peter in my novel, in Threadcaster, is very much this. He's my protagonist's dearest friend, closest kin, and if something bad happens to him, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to her. So people can empathize with having a loved one. Everyone's had someone in their life that they consider very important, very close, that they would come over in the middle of the night for, and you can sort of play on those affections that everyone has in their own lives by seeing something similar on the screen with my characters. So I'd really like to have either an adopted parent kind of situation, or a best friend, or a sibling, or sometimes a romantic character too. But I really like to rely on those non-romantic characters, just because it's a love that's you feel like you're giving mostly and not taking so much. And not that romance is taking, I'm sorry, that came out wrong. But everyone talks about, the romance as a genre.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain amount of you've entered this partnership.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's the love of a parent to a child or something like that, then that's an automatic sort of unconditional, sweet kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a different tone.
Yeah, because the love between two partners can be broken,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes unrepairable.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I do is, and I haven't talked about what I do at all yet. Notice, that's the joy of being the producer here. No, in all honesty.
Well, use your internal monologue and tell us what's up.
I sat there wondering about Brad. Was he trying something?
Why was he baiting me? What was his motive?
He's intending to take over. No. And what I like to do is, I like to stun my characters. Let me use an example. In the current work I'm working on, which is a audio drama, is an adventure-based story. The Kairin. A woman, basically she is a senior year journalism student. She has a very interesting background, which we won't go into right now, except for she gets a call. She's in the middle of typing up a story for the school newspaper, when she gets a call from her godfather, who was her father's boss, telling her that her father has just been found having committed suicide. Now, right there, she's like, shocked. Then we have a long car ride in which she's coming back to home with the godfather went to pick her up. And in there, she's going through this of both the shock and trying to understand what has happened, and through that realization, she's like, he didn't commit suicide. Then I'll go ahead and reveal this part, is the father is found hung or hanging in his study. Kind of I know, it's a trope. And it's not impossible that this father would commit suicide, but it's the method of suicide that throws her. If he had, because of his background, if he had committed seppuku, it would not be surprising. If he had taken poison, would not be surprising. If he had tossed gasoline on himself and set himself on fire, that would not have surprised her. The fact that he hung himself is outside of what she would have expected. And she's having to deal with this. I've got to work on this monologue because it's two pages in length, which is 2 minutes, and what I've already said in the previous part of this is you can't have that long of a monologue in radio play. But she comes to the realization of, no, he didn't commit suicide, something else is going on here. And that begins her adventure, if you will. So that's the way I show. Sorry, everybody. I've been having trouble with that all weekend, as I always do anyway. But it shows what she's like. Hopefully, it creates character sympathy, and it builds up the tension for her at that moment. So with that was me. Hey, Melanie, you're sitting over here all quiet. Do you have anything to add?
Nah, not really about this topic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just monologues or.
Well, here's a question.
Yeah.
You have a character in the fairy tale that you're transcribing that doesn't
Yeah.
speak at all. How do you communicate her feelings if she can't
actually,
speak in
she
an
does-
audio drama?
Yeah, she does speak until like the last, either half or third. I'm not sure how long that part's gonna be, but actually, so far, I don't actually have her having internal monologues. They might end up back in there or in there in version draft 2 or 3. But right now, I have the narrator describing what's going on. And I've also added a character or two that's following her and watching her so they can be describing what she's doing. Say, look, she's doing X, Y, and Z, you know. So.
Which that becomes a trick because that can, I know you said you're going to do this probably more later, second, third draft, but that can also bore the audience when they listen to it.
Well, yeah, but by this point in the story, because we've already set up what she's doing, the listener should know why she is traveling to the churchyard to pick the thistles.
Mm-hmm.
So when the archbishop and the king watch her do it, only it's not the archbishop anymore because I changed that. Sorry, I'm basing a story on Hans Christian Andersen's The Wild Swans, but I'm changing so much about it. It is no longer the same story, but it's still based on it. You can recognize the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But point is, you can just the archbishop character describing what's purposely misinterpreting what's going on would actually be more entertaining because I think the audience would already know what she's really doing and why she's really doing it. And he's the one lying about it and trying to get her stopped, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Any final thoughts on thoughts?
Final thoughts on thoughts.
Some great movies that use internal monologues. So I threw out Dune a lot. But actually, Highlander's another good one. The one with Connor McLeod.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Lambert. And the reason I say that is he often uses internal monologue as a way of a couple of ways. One is sparking a past thought. So he'll start thinking about the past and he'll give you a little bit of narration and then they morph into the past. Or he'll think about somebody else, a character that's not with him, like Ramirez or something like that. There are a ton of movies out there that use internal thought, so check them out and enjoy them. But I wanted to throw that one out because I thought of that.
For radio plays, I'll tell you probably one of the best ones to find. The old time radio plays is Suspense. The entire anthology is filled with it.
The Shadow.
The Shadow is good too.
The Shadow is a very good, both in the radio play and in the movie for internal monologues.
You have a very famous short story, The Telltale Heart,
Oh, good.
which is virtually all interior monologue and very
Sorry,
and very highly
Heart.
suspenseful.
Mm-hmm.
So they're out there.
Yep.
Use them sparingly. Enjoy them.
I do have a final question though. I
Final question.
asked this earlier and I didn't. So, we are a group of various different kinds of writers sitting around this table. Some of us are plotters, some of us are pantsers, some of us are kind of hybrids between them. So, I need to ask this of those of you who are plotters, and will volunteer the information. Do you plot how your monologue is going to go? Do you plot out to that detail, or do you leave it
Like internal monologues or monologues?
internal? Well,
Okay.
both.
Give
it to me both.
Both, okay.
You opened up the door to both.
Yes, I plan out my exterior monologues. No, I don't tend to plan out my interior monologues.
Good. How do you do that? You
Like,
say
Speech
exterior
here,
monologue, yeah,
arrow.
speech here.
No. Like, so, when I'm taking Alexander and Iron Horseman is a good example. So part of the entire story is this build-up that this 16-year-old kid who is basically living under the yoke of all the adults around him, I knew at some point was going to have to break out from underneath these people and stand on his own. At some point he was going to have to say, screw you guys, we're doing it my way. And it's become a thing that I then carry into Iron Zulu, And I also carry an Iron Lotus. The Duke cannot stand Alexander because, as he likes to call him, he is an insolent pup. Because he says what he is thinking and does what he wants. So I've planned that out. Like that scene where he barges into the room and tells all the noblemen to stick it, and we're going to do this my way because my way is the right way. I knew I had that scene. I knew I wanted that scene, so I planned for that scene. It's very much, I knew what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, all that kind of stuff. The reactions the noblemen were going to have to this. But in terms of internal monologue, when I'm doing it, that tends to come across as I don't plan my dialogue either. Like I might plan out, I know what I want them to talk about. In this scene, we're going to talk about this. But I don't plan out individual dialogue. I like it to come more free-flowing than that. So I tend to have a conversation in my head that then gets put onto paper. And internal monologue just becomes part of that as well.
You're the other.
Well, I'm not a plotter particularly, so go ahead.
I'm a plotter.
Sorry.
I don't plot that tightly. My plot is basically an outline. It's just first they go here, then they do this, then they go here, then they do this. And my plotting dialogue scenes and plotting speeches and emotional things mostly just comes from me having fun sitting around and daydreaming about what's going to happen next in my story. So do I sit down one day with a pen and paper and go, all right, let's figure out this entire book. Let's line it all up. No, it's mostly, I came up with this really good scene where my lead characters find themselves at the end of their strength and they're sitting by a fence post and what do they say to each other. And I just dream about what that conversation is like and how it feels to be in that moment when you're at the end of your strength. What do you say to someone that you think you're getting ready to die? And that gets stored in my brain. Sometimes I write that down if I've got a particular turn of phrase that I know I'm going to forget. But as far as plotting goes, if I have that scene handy, I go, okay, where does it fit? And then I'll insert speech here, underline arrow onto my outline. Because my outline is literally just a list of items that happen and figuring out what order they're in, and then I pants from one keyframe to the next keyframe. It's a straight ahead versus keyframe animation style.
Okay.
It's like some people so when you're animating, some people keyframe out everything. They do the major actions in a scene, and then they go in and they decide what the action is directly in between these two keyframes, and they draw that one, and they decide the action between that in-between keyframe and the major keyframe, and they draw that, and then you just sort of narrow the focus down that way. But that's not how I animate it, and that's not how I write. When I write, and when I animate, I do pose to pose. So you do the major broad strokes in the scene, and then you look and see, okay, I need him to be, I'm animating a jump. He's going to be on the ground, and then he's going to be in the air. And instead of going in and animating the frame in the middle when he's halfway in the air, I start at the ground, and I animate up into the air, and then I stop when I'm in the air and say, okay, where does he go next? And that's how I write as well.
Excellent.
Well, although I'm not a plotter, that doesn't mean I don't know anything about where I'm going. In each chapter, I have some idea of where the thing is going to go, and I know that I want to end with action. That's because of the beats in the story. And so it should have a rising action toward the end of the chapter where I want to leave with a cliffhanger. So any interior monologue that I do is apt to be early in the chapter and will be a part of the development toward the thrust of the chapter.
I'm glad you said just because you're not a plotter doesn't mean you don't know where you're going.
That's right.
Same here. I always have an idea where I'm writing towards. Okay, and on that note, if no one else has anything else to add,
No.
in that case,
Here's the mind killer. Sorry.
it's okay.
I just had to throw it in one more time.
What was that?
You are because you never mind.
And I would love to be the quiz ass hatter.
I don't know.
Take a drink.
I don't know.
I'll drink the water of life. I'll try.
I don't know.
And have blue eyes.
Life.
Oh, I would love for
You like to
blue
have
eyes, that'd be
blue
cool.
spiced eyes.
Yeah.
Spice eyes.
Spiced eyes.
Sounds like a Vietnamese dish.
And on that note, we want to wish you all have a great week writing, and tune in next week for yet another interesting tale in the writing industry.
Have you ever written an audio play? Have you even considered writing one? Visit www.windingtrailsmedia.com because currently we are looking for audio plays to produce. Again, that is www.windingtrailsmedia.com and visit calls for scripts. And while you're at it, please sign up for the newsletter and you will find that icon at the bottom of every page.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information.
The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.